There, we're live! Hello, it's Tuesday, May 31st, and this is the ninth installment of Lisa Conversations. I'm Lee Damon, Senior Computing Specialist at the University of Washington.
And hello, I'm your co-host, Tom Limoncelli. I'm a site reliability engineer at StackOverflow.com.
Easy for you to say, Tom. For the next couple of months, we'll be joined by guest host Kat Akita, a Senior Security Researcher at Akamai.
Hello there, everyone. Glad to be here.
And as you can see, the security researcher does not want to be seen.
So each month, Lisa Conversations brings you a speaker from a past Usenix conference to discuss their presentation and find out what's new.
So before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone, we're looking for Q&A questions, obviously. We'd like to be able to include you in the conversation. So click on the QA button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If I remember correctly, it's up there or somewhere. If you don't see it, it's a 3x3 grid. Click on that and you should get the QA button.
In this episode, we'll be talking with Clay Caviness and Edward Eigerman from Google. They gave a talk at Lisa 2015, which I very much enjoyed, called Managing Macs at Google Scale. Clay, Edward, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'm Clay. I manage Macs at Google. SRE is my official job title, but internally it's the shiny reliability engineer because Apple is all shiny.
And I'm Ed Eigerman, and that's also what I do.
Yeah.
So you're both shiny. Okay.
That's the shiniest.
So we always open up with a couple of questions. I'm just going to rattle off the first two, and you guys can work it in however you want to. You actually kind of already answered part of it. Tell us what you do at Google, and has your position changed since the presentation?
Position hasn't changed. No, it's still the same. So we have a Mac operations team, which is now 10 people, up from I think 7 at the time. We manage all of the Macintosh computers that the company uses, and that's what our team does. And the job itself is sort of always changing, but still the same. I mean, we're still doing the same core job, but the details sort of shift around and move as time passes.
And would you care to give us like a brief, and I do mean brief, explanation of what the talk was about and the reaction to the presentation?
Sure. We talked about the different tools that we use to manage what was then 43,000 Macs. It's now about 78,000 Macs at Google. We're very, very heavily managed end-user fleet, so we try to get out of our users' way as much as we can. And the talk was mostly about the different tools we use to manage their imaging, our user settings, their security posture, and things like that. And it was very well received.
Yeah. The Register wrote an article about it called "Who's Apple's Most Frustrated Fanboy?" and it was us. So.
And everything stupid that I said that the Register quoted, they attributed to Clay.
That's because they attributed everything to me. I don't know, they couldn't pick up the different voices. So. Outside of that, we had some pretty good feedback just in the hallway conversations and follow-ups and other things like that. So I think this was the first talk like this we did, right?
Yeah, we've given a similar talk since then, but this was the big one.
Yeah.
And it was probably had the best reception and the most interested parties.
So to lead us into the conversation, do you have any tech updates you want to give us about anything you've changed dramatically since giving that talk?
Well, I'd listen to the talk again because I can remember what we've talked about, and it's like the frog in the water. You don't realize, oh yeah, all this stuff has sort of changed, but it's still kind of the same. I mean, we're still puppets. We're fully standalone now. We were in the process of doing that. The imaging. Creating images, we had just released. We're using something called CanHas Image that we just released publicly, and then that was short-lived because then we decided to use the external Mac community had sort of moved on to another tool called Auto Damage. So we've used that and sort of gotten rid of the CanHas Image. I think that's the main thing. Is we have some sort of long-term plans in the works, and we've added some more stuff with security. I mean, in the talk it was mostly encryption, file vault encryption, but we're rolling out Santa, which is our program that does binary whitelisting. That's currently in progress and working pretty well.
Yeah. And I don't know if when we did the talk, we may not have had antivirus installed.
No, I think we just, yeah, so we had just gotten rid of antivirus because Tavis Normandy had discovered a bunch of flaws in Sophos. And then we've actually gone back and added some antivirus for a while, and then we'll see what happens once Sans is out.
So along those lines, how have you been dealing with Apple and them tending to be pretty slow about patching critical security issues? Do you guys roll your own patches, or?
Yeah, we try not to, only because it gets complicated, especially with 10.11. 10.11 has everything in the system integrity protection, sort of like what the SE Linux. You know, all of the system's tools are locked down, even can't be changed even by root processes. So that makes it patching things difficult because you can't really patch system tools without booting into a different mode and patching it that way, and that's not really feasible 80,000 times. So generally not. I mean, we did, I think.
We have in some extreme situations, but it's not our first.
Yeah, I patched for, what was the bash bug? Shell shock. I remember I patched bash, but that was back in 10.10, I think. Usually for the kind of pants on fire sort of security bugs, Apple's actually fairly quick. I mean, not as fast as we would want, but they tend to be, a couple of days, which is probably okay.
In the world of commercial OSs, they're pretty quick. In the world of open source OSs, they can be faster. So it's a trade-off, for sure.
So given how notorious Apple's enterprise support is, does that impact you guys? Do you have ways around that, or have you just given up on their enterprise stuff? I'm in Xserve. Remember Xserve?
Yeah.
Also, could we define enterprise, because it's a little different for different companies?
Well, I mean, I can tell you, so I worked in enterprise sales for Apple for a number of years. So I know what they think of the enterprise, which is basically a business that owns like 100 Macs or more. They have a very low bar. Yeah, but I mean, there's a number of things that go on in our relationship with Apple. One of the things we always talk about here as a joke is we're a block from one of the Apple stores here in New York City, and we always joke that we're Apple's biggest business customer by far, but they probably sell more dollar revenue at the Apple store a block from our place every weekend than we buy in a year. And that's very clearly where Apple's bread is buttered. So we don't get a lot of sort of direct assistance from them, and we just have to work around that in general.
Well, I think that's really what made your talk exciting, because you're big. Other companies that, most people in the audience, maybe they do have 100 Macs. If Google isn't getting Apple's attention, with 100 Macs, they're really not going to get Apple's attention. And you really provided either open source or you open sourced yourself tools at every layer and showed how you can go at your own and do everything from imaging to keeping things up to date, keeping things secure, having users have a self-service way of, like, basically was the term App Store popular then? I guess, yeah, 2015.
Yeah, they just started.
But so for years, you were providing essentially an app store for your users, so that if they want, some little utility, if you've packaged it, they could just click and install it. And I can't remember if you talked about this, but it also handled a lot of the licensing-related issues for that, which is really important for enterprises. So yeah, I think that's, in my opinion, that's why there was excitement in the audience, because they were like, oh, this is like what I need. And I think there's some commercial packages that do a little of this, but
this commercial package can do most of it. But it's commercial, and it's good if that's what you need. But a lot of these tools you can put together and get everything that the commercial packages do and more. Jamf is the most popular one, the Casper suite.
Mm-hmm. But I know when I came to Stack Overflow, one of the first things I did is I'm not in the IT group. I'm in the SRE group. IT's our internal, desktop laptop team, and I showed them your video soon after it came out, and they were like, wow, this is exactly what we want. And, I actually have that. Those elements are on my work-owned Mac. So actually, just a couple days ago, I went to I know it's not called the App Store, but the Managed Software
Center,
Utility Center, and clicked on something and got the app that I needed. And it's really awesome. And I wasn't even on the VPN at the time, and I did it all securely.
So speaking of the App Store, how are you guys dealing with people just pulling down stuff from Apple's App Store?
Generally, actually, we don't take the position that we have to vet every piece of software that every user is going to run. Just be unfeasible with 74,000 machines and 74,000 or some number of users. And we have a sort of a higher level of trust in anything they're grabbing from the App Store than we would if they were grabbing it from some other source. So actually, we sort of have the least problem with the App Store, while we have a lot of other problems with other software sources besides Apple.
Do you have something in place to stop, like, what is it, Mac Foundry or whatever the ports equivalent is from being installed?
No, we don't want to stop anyone from doing that. There's a lot of Homebrew is a big one, and there's a lot of Homebrew users at Google. One of the big things also about Google as an Apple customer is that we're also one of the biggest developers of Apple software. Right? We have dozens of both Mac and iOS products that we ship that are very popular in the marketplace. So we have to accommodate software developers. We have to accommodate regular users. We're trying to build infrastructure that will protect people from unwanted software and malware without preventing them from doing the things they want to do if we can possibly let them do it.
We tend to avoid. We tend to try to keep what software you can run. That should be a decision that you make based on. In theory, a smart person who can figure this out. So, based on these are the rules that we've learned. These are the I heard competing with care and all the internal trainings and things like that. So sort of based all that, and we just hope that they make good decisions. And obviously they don't always, because there's a lot of users out there and it's easy. But that's why we have all this other logging and monitoring and infrastructure surrounding that, because
that's actually a beautiful lead into one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which is you're doing all this auditing and logging. How much data are you collecting? Does that actually impact what they're sending, what they're able to do, that type of thing?
It can. We have a log collection utility that basically gets all of the logs we can find and ships them up to Google's internal log infrastructure, which is nice because we have a fantastic. Google Production has a fantastic methods for dealing with large amounts of logs. Ours is a lot of logs, and it's not even a rounding error on a small percentage point of.
We're gathering billions of lines of logs. But luckily, we magically have this infrastructure that we are not responsible for.
It's billions of lines of logs, and I don't even think we had to ask for special permission. That's not even it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's
Google collecting data.
Sorry.
Google collecting data? I'm shocked.
What was I? Oh, the actual we actually track the bandwidth usage of these tools and make sure that they have limits of how much they can send over time and that sort of thing. But we talked in the talk about a program called CrankD, and that watches network state changes. So anytime the network changes in some way, change networks or whatever. We run a tool called Network Detect. It tries to figure out if you're on a captive portal network or tethered to a cell phone or something like that. And then the management tools can use that state to figure out whether they should run or not. Like the logs exporter won't run if it thinks you're on, a Google shuttle bus or connected to an Android phone or tethered with your iPhone
or an in-flight Wi-Fi.
In-flight Wi-Fi, things like that. So we have infrastructure around that as well. To we try to only have the tools do the heavy-duty bandwidth, when it's available.
Pure curiosity, what's the most interesting thing you found from looking through the logs?
That you can talk about.
Well, there's that too.
I don't know.
That we can talk about. That's hard. I mean, you come across people doing things that you would really think they would know better. Like the number of people who install applications that are advertised to speed up your Mac, clean your system, like why they think they should install that in a corporate asset is sort of beyond me, but it happens, and it's never very pretty when they do it.
Yeah. So I have a question that came in from Q&A, so I'd like to go ahead and inject that now if I can. Branson Matheson is asking, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the Mac upgrades that have impacted your capability to manage effectively, e.g. 10.10 to 10.11 had major changes in root privileges?
Actually, the 10.10 to 10.11 changes were welcome. Like it was some work. I mean, we had to make some changes to our stuff, but from our point of view, that was excellent, and we want Apple to do more stuff like that. Because I think you can increase the security and supportability of the fleet by having less opportunities for users to mess things up. Because users and us will do terrible things, as I mentioned in the talk. It's pretty easy to screw stuff up. So try to is limit the amount of places that can happen. That is better. So, but in general, I mean, most of the problems that we run into with major OS updates is they seem to every other one seems to have a bevy of just kind of weird problems. None in particular. I mean, 10.11 was actually fixed a lot of problems with 10.10. 10.10 was what was the main block around 10.10 back in the day?
It was horrible.
It was horrible. Yeah. Yeah. 10.10 was just a terrible. Like we didn't actually roll 10.10 out internally until like 10.3 or 4.
Yeah, that was one we held. I mean, we just generally very quickly develop a sort of sense of whether a given major release is a good release or a bad release, and they tend to either be very good, like with the 10.9 update, I think was incredibly smooth, and we had the whole fleet updated very, very quickly. And then 10.10 was kind of unpleasant and kind of ugly. Certain things specifically, like directory services, Apple just likes to keep moving the cheese on that one. Like every time they put out a new OS, you never know what directory service is going to look like or how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Or same thing even? Or if it will be the same thing even? Wasn't 10.10 when they changed that?
Well, they've changed it. They've changed it a lot. Like they changed it. We could go back to 10.0 and talk about all the times they really radically changed the directory services.
Yeah, the core piece of infrastructure on the OS, and like, let's someone.
This time we're making it out of cheese.
Yeah,
it's like.
Yeah, I remember changes to LDAP.
Yeah, and 10.10 also had the Discovery D replacement. So
Lord, yes.
It was just so bad. Anyway, but I don't want to. I'm getting the shakes now. So.
Well, hey, that does bring up an interesting point. So you have a vendor comes out with a new release, and there's a gap of time between when it's released and when you can actually deploy it to your environment, because these tools have to be updated and that kind of thing, adjusted. Do you, as a team, have like a goal of how long that gap is, or do you have any tricks that you could recommend to our viewers on how to narrow that gap?
Yeah, well, our internal goal, it's point releases go everywhere in 2 weeks, and major OS updates in 2 months. We usually beat both of those easily. I mean, 10.10 was a big exception with the major OS updates. But like 10.11, we were basically ready the day it was released. I mean, we'd done testing all the pre-releases. So you just sign up for the Apple Dev account, and you download all the developer seeds, and you test all of your infrastructure against that, and you make sure it's going. You do a lot of testing. We usually start a pilot group of outside of our team as well to try to say, all right, here's because we have a lot of people who want to get the brand new shiny, so we say here, do this and tell us what works and what doesn't and how it goes, and so we get good feedback that way. But the main thing is just get the pre-release stuff from Apple as soon as they release it,
and then verify it in the release version because they'll change things.
Yeah.
If you have users who want, for some reason, to be running the old version, do you allow them to, or do you say no? Everybody has to go to the new one.
So we have a So we always have a period of time when we're rolling in the new version. Then after that, we'll usually maintain a list of exceptions of the last version for people who have specific reasons. And then past that point, we try to push them off the corporate image. like there's plenty of people here who need to test their app running on 10.5 or 10.6, and that's great. We want them to do that, but at some point they should be doing it on a machine running a vanilla OS image.
Yeah.
That's not attaching to any corporate resources or getting email or anything like that.
Yeah, and usually the overlap is 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, which turns out to be half the time of the OS cycle, but still, I mean, there's usually a bunch of people who just don't upgrade because it's change, and I don't want to have to worry about fixing anything that might be broken or whatever. Generally speaking, the uptake is pretty quick. Just a few laggards that kind of hang around. And
I would say at this point we're probably down to 0.01% of our users on the last version of the OS on Yosemite.
Yeah, it's a couple hundred, I think. Can't be much.
What's your hardware refresh cycle then?
3 years.
3, yeah. I think it's 3.
3 years, and we tend to have a few machines. There are people, surprisingly, well, you have a large enough group, you have all kinds of weirdos, people who don't want a new machine, right? So we do have machines out there that are 6 or 7 years old, but at some point they're no code. It's like if you need any help with this, you have to take a new machine. But typically our refresh cycle is 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we support any hardware that Apple supports with that version of the OS. I mean, we don't particularly worry about hardware choices and decisions.
So you still have cheeseburgers?
There are some, yes. Yeah.
Yes, I still have one of those in my office as well. So I have a note here that I wrote down while watching your video. Do you or how do you deal with BYOD?
We don't. Mostly
Yeah.
on the Mac desktop fleet. I mean, it's if you need a Mac, you get a Mac, and if you bring your own, that it's your own, and it stays your own, and it doesn't, get Google certificates or anything like that.
Yeah, part of our enforcement security policy is that we have a PO for the machine.
Yeah.
So if someone has their own Mac, it stays on the guest network.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they
Like anyone visiting the office,
Yeah.
Wow, so that's a big change. Where I work, it's amazing how many people have just this mix of personally owned machines and work-owned machines that they use for development, and I think that's like an interesting extreme versus companies like Google, who I like how you phrase that. You have to have a PO for everything attached to the network. Yeah.
Does that hold for phones as well?
less so. There's some allowance for people owning their own phone. It gets complicated, but it's black and white on the desktop, laptop side. On the phone side, it gets grayer and weird.
So I want to
How much about it?
I want to interrupt real quickly to remind our viewers that there is a 3x3 grid in the upper corner, probably that one, but I'm guessing. And it hides the QA button. Please click the QA button and give us a question to ask. Speaking of phones and iShinies, now that OS X is looking more and more and more like an iShiny, is that going to affect what you guys are doing, or do you think you'll just be able to continue coping with it?
I don't think we have any big problems with that. I mean, it's hard to read. You kind of have to read through the tea leaves of what's coming from Apple, and because they will never give you a roadmap. Like they just won't. That's just not in Apple's DNA. They're never going to tell you what's coming up. Like before 10.11 and the system integrity protection was announced, like 3 days before WWDC announcement, they had like a double secret probation squirrel meeting with our Apple rep. He's like, "Oh, this is coming," and by then we'd already read about it in like the rumor press. But yeah, thanks guys, we appreciate it. Giving us 2 days lead.
In all fairness, they invited us to the meeting like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before that, but their lawyers didn't approve actually having the meeting until everything was already leaked to the press anyway. So
yeah, so I mean, it's you can kind of read between the lines a bit and here and there how things are moving. I don't think it's going to be that iOSified anytime soon. I mean, who knows? The future is a lot of time, so lots can happen. But
I mean, I think the two things that we're sort of always afraid of, and I think generally the attitude of the team is that it's not going to happen anytime soon. But the two things we're always afraid of is that they're going to, like the iOS world, they're going to make the App Store the single point of entry for any binary, right? They're going to say, you can only run things signed by the App Store's certificate on the Mac, and doing it how they implemented it could be very problematic. Or the other thing would be that they would say the only way you're going to manage these machines is using an MDM. And they haven't really done anything to move towards either of those bad end cases for us.
Yeah.
But those are the two things we worry about. But I think there'll be a lot of indicators a long time before that happens.
Yeah, usually the big changes like that tend to be pretty apparent in the previous OS. Like, if there's something like that coming, it'll probably be apparent in the 10.12 in WWDC. They'll probably have a bunch of, like, if you look at it, it's clear these sorts of things are happening in 10.13 or whatever it's going to be. 10.13 Bakersfield or something, whatever it'll be.
Like, I would expect in 10.12 for them to say, oh, and there's a system integrity protection setting where you can only run things from the App Store. And that would be somebody on the line, that's going to be the default setting.
Yeah.
There kind of is. I mean, there is a setting you can say to only run stuff from the App Store. That's been there for 3 or 4 releases now, I think.
Yeah.
Right, but this might be like more enforced system-wide everywhere. Only not. I could see that they could possibly move to that's only changeable by if the machine is enrolled in DEP, device enrollment, and talk to an MDM, and you can assert that it's owned by a company and not owned by a user, because Apple is concerned about that sort of thing.
As someone who works mostly from the command line, that's going to be weird to go to the App Store to buy cat and awk and sed, but I'll deal with it.
Well, I don't know that it's ever going to happen. I think that I've heard from different people inside Apple that that's never going to happen, but
Well, if I was a CEO of Apple, there's 2 things I would do. First, cash out and buy an island and live there. But the second thing that I would do is I would tell my developers that I'd pick a year like 2020 or 2025. I'd say by that time, these laptops are just going to be an iPhone that lets you, or it's going to be iOS with just enough Unix so that developers can write apps. It's going to be the development platform.
But even developer platform, that's a huge box of tools that
Sure.
Right. So and it's hard to tell. Like I think there's still enough of the creative group of the creative feeling around Macintosh computers that I don't think locking things down that well will happen anytime soon, or if it'll be very, very slowly. It'll be interesting to see how things move. It'll be good.
So speaking of that type of thing, do you guys actually sign all of your packages?
Yes.
All?
Well,
close
not
to.
all,
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So we open sourced something called Santa almost 2 years ago, I guess, which is a binary whitelisting agent for the Mac. And in the course of deploying that, we've tried to make sure everything is signed, because it's much easier to maintain whitelists for the signing certificates done for the individual binaries.
Right.
So we're getting there. We're close. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
Is there any relationship to certificate transparency there?
I don't. Not with Santa in particular. We're just looking at it's the certificate that Apple issues for developers to sign applications.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the thing is that we have this weird certificate chain dealing with signed macOS binaries, because they're essentially they don't have to be, but they essentially are all. The second step up from the certificate is Apple, and then it's Apple all the way to the top from there. So typically we have a sort of a high level of trust that the certificate was issued and that the developer met Apple's criteria for issuing the certificate, and that gives us a certain level of trust of the certificates. We don't have the issue that our Windows compatriots have, where there's 100 different CAs signing certificates for developers to use, and you don't really know if they've got internal in-house security issues or whatever. That we have sort of a higher level of trust with Apple. It may be the opposite of certificate transparency in some ways, because really we're trusting a big opaque black box because we know the company.
Right, and some of this is it's Apple, so that's here's what you have, take it. And,
right.
Like they have this is their way they sign certificates, and that's just the way we have to deal with. Right. I mean, I wouldn't want to re-architect all of our code signing infrastructure to use some sort of third-party thing. That's not really going to gain us anything.
Mm-hmm. I was actually thinking in terms of publishing your various whitelists and, saying, hey, world, here's all this stuff that you can go and look at and verify.
I would have to say I pushed to publish our whitelists, and it's not going to happen. It just displays our vulnerabilities. Like, it just displays the attack surface of what applications we're running, and what's a credible attack vector for Google, because you'll know what we are whitelisting. So I haven't gotten any traction on trying to share that information with the rest of the world.
Okay.
So, sorry, somebody speaks? These Hangouts, occasionally I hear echoes. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So I wanted to talk about encryption real quick. You guys mentioned key escrow and stuff in your talk. Has any of that changed with the newer releases, or are you still just basically...
we're still enforcing file vault 2 encryption, and then we're escrowing the recovery key. Excuse me, with Clipper. Cauliflower Vest, sorry. Right.
Clipper.
So Clipper was the internal name, and for as now apparent reasons, that was not a good external name for Google to release a key escrow tool. So we renamed it Cauliflower Vest, which is an anagram for file vault escrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's still happening. I mean, we're still escrowing all the keys internally for that, because obviously we need to be able to access the machines for. Someone forgot their password, legal discovery, all sorts of reasons.
It's been very successful. It's been a very steady, solid apparatus. It's really well.
It's rare we have any interactions with it. Anytime you do, it seems to work it's actually all the time. So it's pretty solid.
So
one of the problems I had.
Can we just back up about the Cauliflower Vest?
Yep.
So could you just walk me through that? Because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that. So I know when I install my personal Mac and encrypt the disk, it gives me this big string that says copy this in.
Yep, that's the license plate.
So what is this different? It's the license plate number? Is that what
it is. Yeah. So you can access that. You can start encryption and access that code using a FDE setup on your Mac. So we have a provisioning app that runs on top of the setup assist you normally see, and that sets up the user's password and escrows starts encryption, takes that license plate key, sends that up to Cauliflower Vest, with the username, and then.
So it securely sends it to this enterprise database, and then if I forget my password or whatever. You have some internal procedure where I can prove who I am, or that I'm from security and I'm allowed to access this or whatever, and then you can get that key, unlock the hard drive. So that sounds right. And the alternative is the key could be escrowed to iCloud, but then Apple has it, and
and honestly,
I could see companies not wanting.
Well, the concern is not so much that Apple has it, because Apple doesn't have anything really. It's encrypted with you get those 3 questions, and it's basically encrypted with the answers.
Okay.
So Apple doesn't actually have access to the recovery key. Like they couldn't, the government couldn't say, please give me this recovery key. They say, well, no, you need the answer to these questions, and then we can maybe. Right. So it's not so much that Apple has it. Not that we don't trust Apple, because we kind of have to implicitly, because we're running all of their code everywhere. It's more that we need access to it as an institution, and because having with the iCloud thing, that goes again. That's based on these 3 answers that the user gave, right? So we need the user to get it back, and if the user is, out of the picture for any number of reasons, we need to get access
Let's just
to
say
that.
they're dead.
Yeah, that's me.
And
They're under investigation, and we need to have access to this laptop, and they're no longer with the company. We don't need to have to call them up and say, well, what's your favorite pet? Whatever the questions are. Right.
Could you talk a bit about the controls you have around that, so that you can't decide that you just, I don't know, love this user so much you have to see everything they have on their laptop?
Well, there's access controls on all the things. There's a limited group of people who can actually access the recovery token itself, and all accesses to that are logged and audited. And I believe the system emails the owner of the machine as well.
Right.
So, like, if I try to access your recovery key, you'll get an email saying, "Hi, this Clay just accessed your recovery key." So it's not only is the back end logging and auditing everything, it's also telling the people that it's this is happening.
Because events have occurred.
Oh, okay. So that sounds really useful. Has there been a lot of uptake on that since you open sourced it?
There's been some. There's another thing called Crypt as well, another open source tool that's a similar sort of thing. So both of those, some people, so Crypt you can run sort of locally on your own machine server somewhere, whereas Cauliflower Vest is App Engine. And some people don't want to have to escrow the stuff in App Engine because, storing their own company stuff in another company, which limits the uptake, I think, of Cauliflower Vest more than others. But I think Crypt has, these sorts of tools have been used quite a bit, though.
Mm-hmm. Do you do anything related to that, to like Time Machine or anything like that, or is it just for the boot drive and whatever is on the boot drive on the Mac?
Just the boot drive. Yeah, we discourage Time Machine use.
It's hard. Well, I don't know if it's still the case, but at least it was the case. You can't force encryption on Time Machine volumes.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's a lot of problems where you can't force.
Right, and that's exactly, and so that's been our main thing. We're discouraging people from using that as a mechanism for backing things up.
So what do you do when people want to back up their laptops? What do you recommend?
Google Drive. Right. Not really back up, but you live in the cloud. You should go to a cloud company. You should store your stuff in the cloud. And hooray, cloud. It's sort of a glib answer, but it's sort of that was the direction we were given several years ago, and that's kind of where we're going. We still want to figure out some backup because there does tend to be some amount of data that people don't or forget to back up in the cloud in one way or the other.
We actually did a test recently to see what. So we looked at the Sony problems, glitches they had, where basically all of their machines were wiped by troubles. The trouble times, where basically all their machines were wiped by someone mean. And then we wanted to say, well, what would be the impact on us, because we don't have a real backup solution for our end users. Our solution is you should have your stuff in the cloud. Everything should be recoverable. If it's important IP, it should be checked in somewhere, all that stuff. And the answer was that we weren't terribly vulnerable to that kind of attack, but we do often revisit, like, do we want to have some sort of a backup for our end users?
I live in abject terror of CryptLocker.
Yeah.
Somebody bringing their laptop into the lab and connecting it to our file servers.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we're. I don't want to say we're safe from that because that's just asking for trouble.
No,
but we're not. But it's. I think every time we've checked, it would be a lot of work to get back. But I don't think the actual loss of data would be critical.
Famous last words.
It is.
It's a cost-benefit balance, and it would hurt, but would it hurt as much as?
Yeah.
Oh.
Read-only snapshots can be your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I remember right, your comment about living in the cloud reminded me about Chromebooks, of course. Are Macs, if I remember when you gave your talk, Macs were the most popular desktop. Is that right?
Yep. Still are by a hair.
Are Chromebooks becoming more popular, or is that just? So
the company is growing. Like, one of the things that makes it hard for us to really see the trees for this issue is that the company is growing so quickly, that we have phenomenal growth. Whether that means we would have had greater growth if other platform was less popular, it's hard to tell. But our growth and Chromebook usage definitely has some of the most phenomenal growth internally within the company. But it's hard to tell how much of our lunch they're eating and how much Windows is lunch and how much of it is, people who have extra computers. Like, it's really hard to tell how it's impacting us.
Yeah. I mean, we've, nearly doubled in number of Macs in whatever 3.5 years or whatever it's been. So, which is, I don't know, that's crazy to me, but here we are.
Well, Google is not exactly slowly growing.
Right. So it masks a lot of these issues over which platform is, growing how quickly, because we're all growing so quickly it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at the numbers, and if I did, I don't know if I could say anyway. But I mean, there's been a fair amount of use of Chrome OS as well. So and Windows has picked up as well. It's everything. You pick the machine that you need for your job. Unless there's a specific reason that you can't use a Mac or can't use a Chrome machine, then you want one. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to remind people one more time that there is a QA button, but I think actually this is probably a good point to wrap up. Anybody have any last comments or questions before we go into the closing script? No? Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap up then. We always ask our guests the same 3 questions, and since there's 2 guests, you each get to answer the question. Alternate or something, you figure it out. I'm sure you can do that. First question is, what was your first computer? Nice. Very nice effect there.
What was your first computer?
IBM PC Junior.
Nice.
Ooh, the keyboard.
Infrared chiplet keyboard. It was great. I had the overlays for like Flight Simulator and all the other games, and yeah, it was great. Well, wasn't great, but it was a computer.
It was a thing.
It was a thing. Yeah.
My first computer was an Atari 400.
Ooh.
Non-remote chiclet keyboard.
Yeah.
Question number 2: have you ever had to press the big red switch? That is the emergency power-off button for a data center or server room.
No, I haven't. I haven't had. Thankfully, haven't had to support data centers much. Closest I came was we had like 3 jobs ago. There was this is probably 15 years ago, but there was like a denial of service attack or something happening on our network, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I walked over, I just unplugged the network, and I was like, all right, we'll just figure it out now. Because I was like, it was easy. It was a smallish company, and I'm like, all right, I'll just, I know how to stop this. Okay, you guys can keep it online. It's okay.
Awesome. Ed?
I never have. I've had a couple of little tiny data rooms under my care, but I never got the chance.
Yeah.
Kind of sad.
I've passed by the red buttons a few times, and I'll be like, that would.
Well, I pressed the red button for other people's data centers.
Right.
All right, and then question number 3 is, so who's your favorite computer scientist or author?
You go first.
I think I'm a big fan of Steve Wozniak, even though he didn't like the Macintosh.
Yeah.
Like, just he seems very focused and good-hearted and easy to cheat.
Yeah. Actually, Wozniak's fantastic. All of the stories on folklore.org about all the crazy stuff that they did, back in the early days of Apple, was just amazing. I like running into Vint Cerf when he's walking around Google, just because like, hey, that's Vint Cerf, holy crap. Actually, there's a whole, they should have like collector cards of all of the famous computer scientists that work in their office.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Clay and Edward. We really appreciate you joining us, and I had a really fun time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this month's Lisa Conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to our producer, Natalie. And Natalie, I realized just now, I don't think I've ever said your last name. So I'm probably going to butcher it, but I'm going to give it a try. Desjardins, or Desjardins. Thanks to all of you as our viewers, and a special thanks to our guests, Clay Caviness and Edward Eigerman. Am I close?
Yeah.
For joining us.
Our next conversation will be with Russell Pavlesic, who's an expert on unikernels, which is a very hot topic and becoming hotter every day. That will be recorded on June 28th, 2016. We hope you'll join us then. You can find more details on our website. This is Tom Limoncelli.
And Kato Keto.
And this is Lee Damon. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month.